This is the ABQ Business Podcast with your host, Jason Rigby. Each week we'll interview visionary business leaders to inspire the creative power and spirit that's in every entrepreneur. Discussing strengths, weaknesses, strategies, systems, and the problems we can all solve together for a new future for local small business.
What is up, guys? Super excited today. Terrell Turner, he is with the TLTurner Group.com. Also has a podcast, so that this is going to be great. It'll be two podcasters talking to each other. It's the Business Talk Library. How are you doing today, Terrell?
I am great. I'm great. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, not a problem. I kind of wanted to get into a little bit of, because you have on your bio at LinkedIn, you have content creator that makes accounting and finance simple. And I love your tagline for your TL Turner Group. You have finance should not be the most complicated part of your business.
Yeah, I mean, that's definitely how I feel because, I started off as a traditional accountant and really spent a lot of time working with non-finance professionals. So helping them understand what I had spent years learning. And I'm like, it shouldn't be this difficult for them to understand it. So we started creating content and then serving clients to just, how do we make this simpler so they can make smarter money decisions?
So when you were starting out and you were looking at this, obviously you went down the right. I see you came from, you graduated from Notre Dame.
Yes, that is correct.
So that was a lot of fun there, I bet. With that, that's a huge college.
It is. What's so funny about it is that the name is probably bigger than the actual school because, when I was there back in 2008 is when I graduated. And when I was there, I think, student population may have been 9,000 students. And I was like, really? But yeah, the name is much bigger than the actual population size.
Yeah, I could imagine, especially with, of course, their football team and everything else there. And then, just the buildings alone, multi-millions and millions of dollars has to go into those.
Absolutely. Yeah. I think when I was there, the water tower, because Notre Dame, I guess the campus is actually its own like city. So they have their own fire department, their own water supply and, police force and stuff. And, when I was there, I think the water tower had to be repainted and there was an alum that donated, I think about $20+ million to take care of that and something else. I was like, wow.
Yeah, that's crazy. So did you, you ended up getting did you get your master's degree there or?
Yeah, I got my master's in accounting from Notre Dame.
So you've been, what got you into have you always been into numbers or I've always curious what makes somebody say, I love accounting. I'm the opposite of that. I'm like creative type. I have a hard time with an Excel sheet, what makes somebody want to go into accounting?
Yeah, for me, I mean, it started back in high school. I think, I was one of those students that I was probably an average student and at some point, like probably maybe the first part of high school, I was a below average because it just wasn't really something that really interests me. But when my school was testing out something called like the Academy of Finance, where they were starting to introduce some very basic level business and accounting classes at the high school level. And so I took my first class and I was like, man, I really like this. And to where I was acing all of those classes to where that was where I felt like, you know what? I'm actually enjoying this. I'm good at it. So I'm going to keep pursuing this path. And so when I went to college, I mean, that's just kind of the route that I stayed on. And it was the same thing. It was, I was good at, the accounting. And I remember even I had really good relationships with my college professors. And I remember having, a discussion with one of my college professors pulled me to the side. And she said, you know what, Terrell, I know for a fact you're not studying. Because I know you're better than this and, you just get the material so well, but I know you're not studying because you should be doing better. And I was getting like, maybe like A- on the test, but she knew that I wasn't studying because I just understood the information so well.
That's crazy. Yeah. I mean, I've always been one that, I'm just not, my brain works totally different, not able to, I can't focus for very long. Sitting in a class seems like the worst thing known to man for me. So, Now, how do you think that she knew, because I always hear this from teachers that have this like innate ability to be able to know when somebody's putting in 100% effort or not. Were you kind of just like, were you partying or just coasting along or?
I think it was that, I understood the theory of the course. And when you're in undergrad, I mean, you spend a lot of time on understanding the theory or going through the theory. And so I would knock those questions out or whatever. And then when she would throw in some curveballs on the test or whatever, I would miss those because I was just moving so quick or whatever, or it was something that she put on the test that you actually had to read the book to actually get that, I guess, that fill in the blank or something. It was some little small line that was in there. And she's like, you aced all the other theory and the practical, but those little curveballs she would throw in there, she knew that I was getting those wrong.
That's smart. I think as a leader, that would be interesting to do that. To just kind of, that seems like that would be a way, because then she obviously saw a pattern or a trend because you kept missing those certain ones that she would put in there.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
Yeah. So then you ended up graduating from Notre Dame, and then what caused you to be? I mean, obviously, you started this group. What caused you to get into as a CPA, get into being an entrepreneur?
Yeah, I mean, for me, it was one of those things that I always thought about. I wanted to get into running a business. And even before I, stepped out into my career, one of the things I was thinking about is, when I was in my early 20s, I was like, what kind of job would allow you to, learn from some of the best and some of the leaders in other organizations. So that was kind of why I went the route of being an auditor, because I'm like, I know I want to run my own business at some point. So an auditor allowed me to audit other people's business, see their financials, see how they ran things, ask them questions, and start to learn. So a part of me always wanted to kind of run my own type of business. I didn't know exactly what, but as I started getting better at accounting and finance, and I started realizing is not only do I understand it, I also have the ability to explain it to other people. And I was like, people are willing to pay me to help them understand this because it's important.
Yeah, and I think that's that key word that you said, content creator. Because when you think about that, it's like, like my brain instantly went, how can you make content around business finance? That just seems like the content would seem just utterly, dry. And so whenever you obviously from school, you began to, from high school in that program, you began to understand this, you picked up on it. It was just kind of this thing of like, yeah, I get this language. Cause to me, that's what it is. It's like a language. I get this language. And is it because you think that you have such a good understanding of it and it naturally came to you that you're able to, simplify it to others? Because usually if you know something completely, you can simplify it, if you know what I mean.
Mhm. Yeah, and I think that definitely plays a huge role in it. And I guess I took a different approach to where there are a lot of accountants who they want to understand it in such depth to where they understand it beyond the average person's comprehension. And for me, I always looked at it as, what, I'm studying this for a functional purpose. Like there's a means to an end for me studying this. Like I'm not studying it just because I like accounting for the sake of accounting. Like I'm studying it, like you said, it's the language of business. So I'm studying it so I can understand the language of business. And then I got to be able to go use it. And that was one of those things that kind of happened for me when I, worked in public accounting. It's a lot of technical accounting, but I moved into industry and started working with Fortune 500 companies. And one of the roles that I had when I worked in investor relations, so my job was pretty much, I was, helping the CEO, his team, and helping them translate, hey, what are we going to actually tell the Wall Street investors when we have those earnings calls or when we have to go to these special meetings, helping them understand it. And I'm like, okay, if we have to talk to the investor public and we got to make this information public, we can't keep it technical. We have to break it down so that the average investor who's looking at our company will be able to understand what was said. And part of my job was actually to write out what the CEO and the CFO was going to say. And when I started doing that, that's where it really started to force me, where you get into things like copywriting, to where I'm like, okay, I have to figure out, how do I actually make this interesting so people aren't like, crying, trying to rush out of the room when they hear this topic talked about. So that's where it really started, for me, is just being a communicator of the information and understanding the information, and then knowing that at the end of this, somebody has to go use what I just talked about. So how do I make it useful?
Yeah, that seems like that's a huge burden to have. I've heard those calls when CEOs hop online, and you can go online and listen to them with different companies, and it's pretty intense. I mean, in the way that, so you you were in contact with the CFO, and then from there, they would. I can't even imagine that job, trying to translate that. I mean, I understand on the investing side of things that's a little bit more simpler, but to be able to take that and translate that so that an investor would understand, because you can move a stock after one of those earning statements. I mean, next thing you know, boom, there could be millions of dollars lost.
Absolutely. I mean, and it was an even interesting time, because at that time, the company that I was, working with, they had, they were pursuing, the EPA had released a new standard change. So there was going to be a massive investment. All the, major competitors were trying to figure out, how do they meet this standard? And the company I was working for had decided, hey, they were going to take a more innovative approach compared to the other competitors. Well, 4 years later, unfortunately, that innovative approach didn't pan out as well. So, this $15 billion company now has to go and announce to the investors, hey, we're having to change our strategy, which also means that, which I knew the Wall Street analysts were going to ask. So they're like, so does that mean the $725 million you've been investing for the last 4 years is a waste? And that's what we had to be prepared for. Like, how do we prepare them to answer that question?
Oh, I couldn't even imagine. That must have been tremendous amounts of. I wonder how many nights you stayed up staring at a laptop screen late at night.
I will say, I'm very thankful that, my girlfriend then, my wife now, that she, was very patient with me, because she didn't see me a lot then.
Oh, I could imagine. Yeah. I mean, that just that alone, coming and trying to explain something, was there a lot of pressure from, obviously the CFO and the CEO, that they're feeling this pressure and knew like doomsday was coming?
They did. I mean, and like I said, that was probably within the first couple months of me coming into the role.
Oh,
And so it was a whirlwind. And I think within my time in that role, like within the first probably 3 months, I mean, the board, there were some changes of people on the board. The CEO, I guess, left, or I guess reached an agreement with the board to leave. And so we brought in an interim CEO. And then there were a couple other senior leaders that I guess were appointed by the old CEO. They were removed and they were replaced. So it was a lot of change and a lot of pressure. But leading up to that, like the old CEO was kind of like, hey, we need to get this messaging right. So it's just like, you kind of knew that his job was on the line. So it was a lot of pressure.
oh yeah. No wonder you want to start your own business. I get this now. So did you go directly from that and then go right into starting your business?
No, actually, I worked for a couple other two other companies before that. Like after that, um, I moved down to Brazil for a year, worked there, did a finance leader role there, came back, worked with General Electric for a little bit, ran a couple of their smaller business units, because, for a finance person, I think, a lot of finance people may say that, hey, they understand how to run a business, and they probably do in theory. But I'm one of those people where I'm like, I want to actually get the practical experience. Like, how do I learn how to actually be more on the front line as a finance person? And so I took a job with GE that gave me that opportunity to do that. And, really working on the front lines with the sales, the VP of sales and the VP of operations and myself were the leadership team where we were figuring out, hey, how could we take at the time it was a $40 million business. Our responsibility was to grow it to a $65 million business. And just like, how do you deal with, managing employees? How do you deal with customers who are or aren't happy? And, what was very interesting is in that role, I was set to go visit one of my suppliers and they were over in the UK. I got a call early one Monday morning and the supplier was like, hey, you're going to have to cancel your trip. I'm like, well, why? And they were like, well, we had a devastating fire. Our factory completely burned to the ground. And I was like, first, is everybody okay? And they were like, no one was in the building. Now I'm like, oh my gosh, like, I'm not going to be able to grow this business because our major supplier just had a devastating fire. Now we have to go back and tell the customer, hey, it might be about 12 to 18 months before we get you new products. And how are we going to figure that out? And for me, it's like, that was a training ground I wanted to, hey, you got to figure stuff out like this if you're going to run a business. And so I think I wanted to get more, well, not exactly that experience, but I wanted to get more leadership experience before I jumped off into my own business.
Yeah, I could imagine. I mean, that right there shows you. And I know GE in and of itself, I know they at least have hundreds of companies, if not I don't know how many they have, but I know, it's crazy the amount that they own. Was it something like when you began to think of yourself as an entrepreneur and then you see all these high pressure roles that you were put in, was that something that began to kind of like mold you and say, I'm in the corporate world, I'm doing this. When did you start thinking this should be a good time for me to exit that and start something on my own?
Yeah, I think it was, I actually ended up taking one more corporate job after I left with GE for about 4.5 years. I took one more corporate job when I moved and I decided to take a job with a tech company. So the tech company based out of North Carolina. And the last piece of the puzzle that I wanted to pick up was on the raising capital side and acquisitions, because at the time, they were going through a couple of acquisitions, bought a company for 20 million and bought another one for 22. So working through that process. And then we were raising about 65 million in private equity funding. And I think is once I got those pieces to where I'm like, I know how to manage it. I know how to work through crisis. I know how to lead for growth and do the standard stuff. Now I got the piece of, I've been through the experience of raising capital. I'm like, now I think I got all the pieces that I need. The rest I can kind of learn as I go in my own business.
Yeah. And I think a lot of, how old were you then when you decided to kind of make that decision?
That was actually early this year in March. So,
Oh, wow. Yeah. So, but like, if you don't mind me asking, what's your age?
Yeah, I am 35.
Oh, okay, 35. So I think, and this is something I see with a lot of entrepreneurs. I have a lot of, I'll get DMs from a lot of 20-year-olds from my podcast, asking me about entrepreneurial questions and stuff. And it's one of the things I tell them is to go and, I don't mean to be so crash when I say this, but, go learn on somebody else's dime before you start blowing all your money on, because you're going to make, even now I'm 47 and have had several businesses. And even now it's the same thing. I make mistakes all the time. So it's like, why would you not be able to do something like you did? And I think you're a perfect example to this, to get all those puzzle pieces in place, even though you're wanting to be an entrepreneur, but to be able to make that decision and have it be educated and eliminate a lot of the risk involved.
I totally agree. I mean, and I think it also really helped with the credibility, because now in my business, which, my business is serving, small to medium sized businesses, when I can tell them, hey, these are the things that I've done for much bigger companies and stuff. It makes it a lot easier for me to have that credibility. And I tell the same thing to other like founders that want to start a business. I'm like, especially if you eventually want to raise capital, one of the things that the investors are going to look at is, your experience. Like, can you actually execute on the vision of this company before they give you money? And one of the ways that they do it is, see, have you ever done it before? Or have you ever worked somewhere where it's been done before?
Yeah, I could imagine. And I know a lot of entrepreneurs, I would probably say the same with myself, is the finance part is the weakest part. Why do you think entrepreneurs don't particularly enjoy or want to even, like you have in your statement, should not be the most complicated part of your business? Why is it so complicated?
I do think that because when it comes down to accounting and finance, I mean, the rules are made by people who are deeply technical accountants. A lot of times when it comes to accounting rules and regulations, they're not made by people who are on the front lines of running the business. So I think sometimes being a person who is a CPA, part of the accounting profession, I think sometimes we don't really grasp that when the code and the language of accounting is written. So I think sometimes that, if you didn't grow up studying accounting, you just don't grasp it because it's not really written by someone like you or someone that's going through your experiences. And so for me, is having, lived through, the technical training of accounting and having lived and experienced the other side, now I can use both worlds to kind of bring the two together because, a lot of entrepreneurs and founders, they're really deep into, there's a whole lot of technical things they have to figure out about their business, whether it's marketing, whether it's the product, whether it's R&D or whatever it may be. So it's like they have a ton of things that they're trying to already figure out. And then when you throw accounting on top, it's just like, they just don't have the energy or the confidence to figure out or to realize, hey, that's a whole nother language I got to learn on top of all the other stuff.
Yeah, and I know for me, what helped me a lot was understanding, because I began to, and I think you see this especially with startups is they're not worried about the bottom line at all. They're just, how much money am I bringing in? That's like, how much am I? Okay, I'm bringing in $5 million. I'm bringing in, every month we're bringing in $2 million. Okay, perfect. And then they're not realizing how much goes out. And looking at that, profit on or loss, and so for me, a monthly statement, I've kind of made it like it's 3D because I'm like creative. So I'm like, these are all puzzle pieces. So how much did I spend on marketing? How much did I spend on for managers? How much did I spend on my staff? How much, was the utilities? And then I can pull other statements and kind of look at it and say, oh, okay, why did I have a huge increase in this? Or, why did this? So I think it's one of those things where, it's just no one has sat down and kind of made it very simple, like being very practical, sitting somebody down. When you're talking with a new client, what's kind of some of the processes that you do to make it so simple?
Yeah, I think the first thing I do is understand where they're trying to go because that's that's a big piece of making it simple is the numbers have to be viewed through the lens of your goal. Because if I don't talk about the numbers in relation to where you're trying to go, you're really not going to pay attention. And I don't blame people for it. So the first thing is understanding where they're trying to go. And then we start to break it down in sections. I mean, where I tell them like, the income statement is going to tell you, hey, what's going on, this month, this year. It's going to tell you how your activity is flowing. And then because, you look at, your revenue tells you, okay, are customers actually interested in what you're selling? And when we look at your expenses, like how much is it costing you to actually deliver those products? Then we start looking at some things with profitability, like how much money do you have left over to either put in your pocket or to reinvest in the business to keep growing it. And then we go to like the balance sheet tells me like how healthy it is. I mean, and what I explain to them is, in the balance sheet is kind of like, looking at your vital signs. There's certain things we need to look at that to make sure that, hey, your business is gonna stay alive. Because if your balance sheet is out of whack, then what that tells me is you may be selling a lot of stuff today, but you won't have enough health in your business to survive until, a year, 2 years, or 3 years. So I start to kind of compare it and look at it that way and start to break it down. And then, I usually wrap up with the cash flow statement. I'm like, that's like the blood that runs through your veins. If you don't have cash, you are not going to have a business, or you're going to have to sell your business at a huge discount, because when you run out of cash, it's similar to, the chess. I tell people, like, cash is king, and similar to chess, when the king is down, that means game over.
Yes. Yeah. 100%. What are some of the mistakes that you see when you begin to talk to business owners? What are some of the things that you're seeing that seems to be common?
Yeah, I think the first one is still mixing personal with business finance. I mean, at some point, if you're going to start a business, I always tell people you have to, it's almost like you're living a separate life. Like, the business has to have a life of its own. Like, you have to separate your personal expenses from your business expenses. You have to have separation there, because when you start to commingle the two, pretty much what you end up, most people end up doing is robbing from the business to finance their lifestyle, which means eventually the business is going to just starve, and it's not going to grow, and it's not going to survive.
Yeah, I've experienced that when I was younger, understanding that, and then learning through that whole process of knowing, that this business isn't an unlimited bank that you can withdraw from all the time.
Mm-hmm.
So have you seen, like, what are some of the things that you're seeing now, especially because, there's a lot of online programs and stuff like that, whether it be QuickBooks or Zero. I mean, there's a ton of them out there. Quicken, what are some of the things that you're seeing that people are making mistakes in looking at, these online programs?
Yeah, I think when it comes to the online programs, I think they are great programs, and they're tools to help you, sort things out, to keep things organized. But what I often see sometimes is when people, where you can integrate it with your bank account, where all your transactions flow through. And some people feel like, hey, well, my bank account is integrated with my accounting system, so everything is done. And it's just like that's going to get the information there. But if you're really, like you said, if you're trying to put the financial puzzle together, there still is some work that needs to be done to make sure that things are going in the right bucket. So when you look at the statements, they actually make sense and they tell you something. And so I always tell, some entrepreneurs that say, hey, you know what, I just integrated it with my bank account and it's taking care of everything. I'm like, no, you still need to have some type of intelligence. I mean, whether it's, you can find a bookkeeper that's inexpensive just to review and to make sure things are going in the right bucket. So when you look at the reports, it actually makes sense, because although some systems say that, hey, this automatically integrates, you still need some intelligence to it to make sure that the integration is functioning and things are going where they should go.
Yeah, and that's something that I think is hugely important, because we always want to, because we find that it's complicated, and then we try to find something that we can purchase that's going to make it easy for us, and then we always want this plug and play. And then we wonder, when we go to buy something, there's no cash available. Have you seen, because of poor finances directly, have you seen businesses, go under, or businesses, struggle? And what do you, if somebody comes to you and they're facing, maybe they're like, I didn't even realize this. And, now I'm, $100 something $1,000 and, my business $100 something $1,000 in debt, and I don't know what to do. And, we're bringing money in, but I don't think I'm going to last a year. What are some of the things that you do in that almost emergency time?
Yeah. So in that emergency time, I mean, one of the first things that I usually look at is first is, where is your cash? And through doing some digging, I can create a cash flow statement to tell them, hey, this is where your cash is going. Because a lot of times people just look at their income statement and not realizing the income statement doesn't tell you your cash story. That just tells you your profitability story, like your your revenue minus your expenses and what's left over. But that doesn't really tell you how your cash is going in and out of your business. So the first thing I do is create the cash flow statement so they can see what that picture looks like. And then one of the things that I found to be very common is I'll then work with the entrepreneurs and say, okay, all right, what products are you selling? Now let's look at the gross margin and the profitability on each of those products. And let's find out, are you selling the products that actually are bringing, profit into the business? Because what I find to happen often is there's a product that they're advertising or they're putting marketing dollars behind, and I line up all their products and I'm like, that product actually is the one you make the least amount of money on. Like, why are you marketing that one so much? Like, and they may have a product over here that they don't spend much time on, but I'm like, you make a lot of money on this product and people want it. Switch your marketing strategy to market that product more, and it will start to help fuel more profit and more cash into your business.
I think that's awesome because that right there alone is showing the need for somebody to step in that's an expert and go through that. I mean, that right there, not only you're going to increase profit, but you're also going to, I mean, now you have an opportunity to come up with a whole marketing plan, and most entrepreneurs would be excited about that. Okay, perfect. Now I have a direction to go in my marketing. Thank you.
Yeah, I do. And I find that to be very, very helpful because that's where I get to help people understand, like, the finances is not just for you to understand it in the bubble. It's just like the finances are telling you a story about how other things in your business are working. And like, when we look at things like that, like doing a gross margin study to where now we can see, okay, all right, where should you be spending your marketing dollars? So it gives you more insight that you can layer on top of your marketing intelligence and marketing data that you're getting. And then when we look at, a lot of times when I just look at the sales and whether it's a business that, let's say if they have inventory and I start looking at, what are your sales versus the inventory that you're carrying? And what we start to realize is, why are you carrying so many of this product? Because people just aren't buying it that much. Like every dollar that you have invested in that inventory is a dollar you don't have available to invest in growing your business. So we start to align those, like, let's make sure we're only keeping enough or what matches what the sales trends look like.
I think that's so important. I've had several business owners, and I've told them, I was like, "You guys are hoarders. You're like, you're just like, oh, I get, I'm like, you have 13 months worth of product here, and it's like, let's get it down to like 90 days, 120 days, something like that. I mean, why do you have so much? Well, they came in, they brought it, and they delivered it, and I said, I'd go ahead and take it. Yeah, and that's so essential because, like you said, I mean that is cash that's sitting there, just wasting away on a shelf. What are I this is so interesting, and I'm glad you're breaking it down for us like this. When you look at entrepreneurs and you look at them and they come to you and they're basically saying, I've got this startup. Maybe I'm wanting to do this. I've got these investors, they're interested in me, but I lack the finance side of things. Can you, what do you do to help them so that they can, because I know this to me seems like something that you could easily do if you did it with a CFO and a CEO, for investors. Have you experienced that where you're, going through and helping somebody put together the finance side of things so they can present that to investors?
Yeah, so I think, with that, I always tell them that, when it comes down to money, money will flow and follow a good plan. So if we can literally lay out a good plan that other people believe in, whether that's a bank that we're going to go talk to, whether that's going to be an investor, if we can lay out a good plan and really walk them through how, hey, by you giving us this money, this is what we're going to do with it. These are the areas of the business. Here's the potential. Here's the, whether it's the market size, and hey, here's, the brand recognition that we already have. When you're able to show people that, hey, by you giving me this money, this is what I'm going to do with it, and this is what you can expect from me. when you're able to show and walk people through that story more clearly, you'll be surprised. Like, it becomes so much easier for you to raise capital. Now, you may have to talk to several people because you got to find people who actually believe in what you're doing. So that may take some work, but being able to put that story together, because there are a lot of people, even when around the time when like PPP loans came out, when people were saying, oh, interest rates are so low, I'm just going to go get a loan for my business. And one of the questions that I would ask my clients is, okay, what are you going to do with the money? Like, what's your plan? Like, because just
Yeah.
because the money's cheap doesn't mean they're just going to give it to you. Like, what's your plan for the money, and how is it going to actually help you grow the business? Because whether it's a bank or whether it's an investor, they have a goal, and their goal may be to get a return on investment for the money that they're giving you. If you can show them how they can get that return, and you can show that through your plan and your story, they're more likely to give you the money.
I love that. Yeah. Cause I think it's almost kind of like that. Like I said before, that hoarder mentality is like, oh, they're giving out almost free money. Let me get it, and like you said, it's like, what are you going to do with it when you get it? Yeah. That's such an important question. I kind of want to shift over to your podcast a little bit for the remaining time we have on Business Talk Library. I mean, obviously I can see, from the way that you communicate and that you can break this down and share it. Is it business talk? Is it mostly just finance, or what is it? What do you, when you say Business Talk Library, what is it to do with?
Yeah, so we started off with just accounting and finance because, I mean, that being my field, and I had business owners that were asking me questions, and at the time I was like, man, I can't get to everybody's questions, but so I started just creating videos of me answering questions about different topics that they had. So I would answer the questions, and then I did that for maybe about a year. And then, probably November of like 2019, my wife came up with the idea like, hey, what if, we actually started interviewing other business owners and letting them share, insights from, their background and, what they had learned. And so we started expanding the show some. And I still do the accounting and finance segment where I talk about different accounting and finance topics that entrepreneurs and business owners should be aware of. And then we started doing an interview series, which we started really kicking it up and getting into our rhythm maybe around like the middle of April of this year. And I would say since April, we filmed 185 episodes since April.
Wow. You guys are just throwing them out there. I do the same thing. I produce a lot of episodes, but 185 episodes, that's awesome. Most people, they're lucky if they get one a week. And, and that's something that I was listening to Joe Rogan a while ago, and he was saying that he goes, you have to just produce content, and I know Gary Vaynerchuk talks about that too. Just that idea of just keep producing content and something will resonate. And, then you become an expert in that area. So, for me, I think I've learned more in my podcast than the material I put out.
I would definitely agree with that because I would say, I mean, the doing that many interviews where you're having conversations, and of course, I have the guest on. Well, the show that they're on is where we talk about their background. What were they doing before they started their business? What the journey has been like. I learn a lot from them navigating, telling the story of their journey. And then even afterwards, the part that doesn't get recorded, we talk about different things where they ask me questions about, the finance and accounting side of things. And, their questions become more, research for me of like, hey, you know what, maybe other people have that question. So I would then go create a quick video about that topic or whatever, because I'm like, other people may have that question. And, it's come up so much to where now some of the questions that I'm running into is, there's only so much capacity I have to take on new clients. So I'm like, okay, how can I still get people the resources? So we're even exploring now the Business Talk Library of creating accounting and finance training for non-finance and accounting people, to where we're working on, how do we still be able to create more content. Because one of the funny things that a lot of guests have told me is like, if you would not have told me that you were a CPA, I would have never guessed it based on your personality.
Right. That's that's awesome. Yeah, no, I think whenever you have these business leaders that are talking to you, what do you think is like the most asked question?
I think when it comes down to accounting and finance, I mean, the question that I've heard the most is really, it's like, how do I know when I'm on the right track? Because a lot of them really, I mean, what I realized is they ended up, they got to where they are, a lot of it by intuition and trial and error. But once you get to a certain, level in your business and you're trying to, tweak things or take things to the next level, you really do need to have, it really comes down to some of the smaller things. And I compare it to like, an athlete that's training. I mean, when you're in high school or even when you get to college, there are some very obvious areas for you to work on. But when you get to the pros, I mean, it really comes down to like little things that you're working on, whether you're trying to shave off, a half of a second or something like that. I mean, because I remember when I was working out and training with an Olympic track athlete. And he was my trainer for a couple of years before he went to try out for the Olympics. And, one of the things that he was telling me about, with the training program that they're going through is he was trying to shave off 0.2 of a second on his, on his run. And I'm like, man, like, how do you do that? And he was like, it really gets down to the very small things and starting to refine it. So the question I get with, businesses, once they're established, they figured out some things, but they're like, how do I know I'm on the right track to take it to the next level? Because, your intuition will only take you so far.
Yeah, and your intuition is based off of the wisdom that you have. So, all of that, those years and years of wisdom, yeah, you may be able to answer that question. But if you've reached a new dynamic in your business, those questions that are coming at you now, you could guess wrong, so, and I've seen that over and over again in my life. And so like on the Business Talk Library, you guys, is it on everything like iTunes, Spotify, all those?
Yeah, so the Business Talk Library is on iTunes, Spotify, on Google, and wherever you can listen to podcasts. We also do the video version of it too, that we have on our YouTube channel at the Business Talk Library.
Okay, and so you could go to YouTube, Business Talk Library, or you could just go to Apple or Spotify, or any of those that you listen to.
Correct.
And just type in Business Talk Library. Terrell, what are some of the things that when you look at podcasting in particular, what are some of the things that you've learned from that? Because I talk to a lot of business leaders and they ask me about, should I start a podcast or not? Being a business owner, I know I have 10 years or 15 years and being an expert in something. And I encourage people to do that, and to get real specific. If you're a plumber and you've spent 30 years being a plumber, I know there's a lot of questions people have, so what are some of the things that you've learned from starting the podcast?
Yeah, I think that, I always tell people when you're starting a podcast, the first thing is just understand you're probably going to suck at it at first.
Yes.
I mean, and it's okay. I mean, just about everyone I've ever talked to that started a podcast, they sucked at it at first. And I think that some people get discouraged early on, but I'm like, hey, you're going to suck at it. I mean, I know I was hard. Like my first 10, videos I did were horrible. I mean, I didn't even let my wife see them before I deleted them. So I think, that's number one, is just knowing that it's going to be bad at first, but it's going to get better. And what I will tell people is, that are like, oh, I don't have time to do it. And I always tell people that, you can find time, to just sit and record, whether you find 10 minutes here or 15 minutes there. Because what you realize is once you start to talk through some of the things that you intuitively understand, what you will start to realize is you're not that good at explaining it. And when you have to practice that. It will make you a better communicator, whether that's you trying to lead your team or whether that's you trying to, talk to a customer or a vendor. You'll become a better communicator by now having to take what you know in your head and allow it to come out of your mouth in an understandable way. And as you start to do that, I think what I have found is that I actually enjoy the type of work that I do because I now understand how to communicate it. I understand the impact that it has on other people. And I think that, being able to talk through your ideas, it helps you clarify your thinking a lot better when you can voice it out and my ideas and the way that I think through ideas become a lot clearer. I'm not going back and forth because I think a lot of entrepreneurs do have that. They go back and forth about things, even though you may know it. But as you begin to talk through it and you begin to train yourself to be able to think through it, in a, I guess you say a systematic process, when you start to think through it that way and you start to talk through it, it helps you actually come up with better ideas and it helps you be able to articulate those ideas and you find a new joy in the type of work that you do.
I love that. Yeah, you're 100% on that. It has helped me tremendously, especially interviewing people with innate leadership skills. I learned so much off of finding people that have been leaders before. It's amazing, and I truly love it. And it's a great medium for people to listen, especially if they're looking for something specific. Now, you had mentioned something, and we can close on this, but you had mentioned something about maybe making courses or something like that. Is that something for the future? Because I think that would be awesome.
Yeah, we're actually in the process right now of working on the framework for a course. One of the first ones we're going to do is, understanding, the basics of tax for your business, like, the different tax topics you need to be aware of. Because what I tell people is that, you may be working with an accountant, but if an issue happens, the IRS is not going to come to your accountant. They're going to come to you. Because they're going to hold you responsible. So you should have at least a basic framework so that you can put the advice that you're getting in context of your business. So we're working on that training. And then there's, like I said, a couple of other things of like financial metrics that you should keep in mind when you're studying your sales and your sales trends. Or, I worked a lot with the marketing teams at the last company that I worked at and really helping them develop the financial metrics to know that, hey, your marketing is on track with your financial goals for your business. And so we're in the process of working on that. Several of those will be releasing several of those between now and the end of January.
Oh, wow. That's awesome. Yeah. I think that is a huge need, especially with business owners and maybe business owners that may not be able to afford, certain services or something like that. At least they can understand it and have a grasp to get their business to that point to where they can, I know I talk to small business owners all the time and finance is the thing, that they, seem to struggle with, and for you to be able to have that ability to communicate it so clearly and make it felt so simple. I mean, that is something, and I don't know if that's a direction you want to go into, but that having those classes available and, people to be able to pay for those and have that information just ready at any moment. I mean, that's just a great, I think it's a great opportunity for you, but it's a huge blessing for business owners.
Thank you. Yeah, we're definitely, like I said, always trying to find ways to innovate because, like I said, we started the journey of the Business Talk Library is how do we help other business owners with what we know? Because we know that, doing, a one-on-one client, we can only do so many. But how do we take the knowledge? Because my wife is also a CPA and she's an executive with a Fortune 500 company in finance. So we're always thinking, how do we take what we know and help other people and help as many people as we can? And content has been a way for us to amplify our voice and to reach more people that we couldn't reach one-on-one.
Yeah, that's absolutely amazing. So you have 2 CPAs in your household. Oh, that's awesome. So, in closing, is there any type of material or books or anything besides, of course, I encourage everybody to subscribe to your Business Talk library on YouTube and, iTunes, Spotify, all that. But is there any other material or something that that is helping business owners now, get a grasp on this?
That was one of the things that kind of fueled me is as I started looking for material, I started realizing like, man, a lot of this is written for people who already understand it, or it's written by a person who already has technical knowledge in this. And so I've been on the search for that myself, and finding that, and which what I will do is I'm going to create a section on my website, the Business Talk Library, where I will start to just drop in there, hey, here are resources, books from other authors as I find them that you guys can check out that will help you in this area.
Well, if you find a niche and there's not very much around it, that's a perfect opportunity, Terrell, to go and move in that direction. You have the gifts and the ability, so that will be awesome. I'll be really excited. If you get I would love to have you on again if you get the training all done and all that, and then I could, share with all my entrepreneur, listeners and business owners and work in that direction, because like I said, this is something that we put off into our detriment a lot of times, and then we're always being reactive to finance instead of being proactive.
I absolutely, I will definitely keep in touch and let you know, because that's a gap that we see, and I think just overall, even what's going on with COVID and just seeing so many businesses that have been negatively impacted by it, for us, it's just like, getting the finance side of their businesses will be a huge part of the recovery of those businesses, or if they want to launch new businesses, to make sure that they have the understanding to build a healthy business that they can, start to regain, what they feel like they lost, or to start to take over new territories in their businesses because they're able to make smart money decisions.
I love that. Well, thanks, Terrell. I appreciate you being on the ABQ Business Podcast, and hope to speak to you soon.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you for joining us on the Albuquerque Business Podcast. And thanks to our sponsor, RigbyDigital.com. Make sure to subscribe and share. And go to abqpodcast.com. Get show notes, resources, and links to everything we talked about today to help you navigate your journey as an entrepreneur and business owner.